Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is Badge 373 from 1973, directed by Howard Koch. This is another Indicator release. I was kind of excited about this Indicator release for two reasons. One, because I really wanted to see the film, and I came very close to buying it on Region A Blu-ray a couple of times. This is a Region B Powerhouse Indicator release. And secondly, this is a Paramount film, which is encouraging for those of us who are waiting for the Parallax view to come out on Blu-ray, because Paramount are notorious for not licensing their products for release. I mean, the Parallax view is one of the best film in the 70s, and that's saying something, but it still doesn't have a Blu-ray release. And Powerhouse Indicator in their most recent newsletter talked about, they've got exciting licensing deals for next year. So hopefully it means there'll be more Paramount releases, and hopefully one of them might be the Parallax view, because that would be quite fantastic. So back to Badge 373. This is one of the films loosely based on the life of Eddie Egan, who's a New York narcotics detective, which The French Connection is loosely based on, with Gene Hackman essentially playing Eddie Egan. So there was three cops who became consultants and writers and actors. So Sonny Grosso, Eddie Egan, and Randy Jurgensen, who gives a very nice interview in this, which is quite informative, about how New York was in those days and kind of how their careers developed. So after the success of The French Connection, these guys were still on the payroll for the police, but then they also got involved with more films. Eddie Egan was more involved in the acting side, Sonny Grosso was more involved in the writing side, and Jurgensen was more involved in being a stuntman. So there was two films in 1973, essentially from these guys. So Sonny Grosso went and did the 7-Ups, which Nazarene Prod did a video on, which I'll leave the link in the description, it's well worth checking out. And then Eddie Egan got involved in making Badge 373, which is his badge number from reality. He also has a role as Robert Duvall's ex-boss after Duvall gets kicked off the force for throwing somebody off a roof. So that's kind of the background. Obviously in the early 70s there were so many kind of gritty cop movies, starting with The French Connection. You had Serpico and Dirty Harry and Walking Tall with Joe Don Baker. You had The Stone Killer with Charles Bronson, which is also an Indicator. But again, back to Badge 373. It stars Robert Duvall as a cop who, like I said, gets kicked off the force because of a slight accident on a rooftop and a drugs bust. And he goes to work as a barman, and then his ex-partner is murdered, so he gets involved, whether the police like it or not, in trying to find out who did it. So this is an early 70s film, so there is racial language in the film that just wouldn't be in films now. You could argue the racial politics in it is again of the time. Again, the interview with Jurgensen, the ex-cop, is quite informative as far as what was going on in New York at the time. So, for example, you had the weathermen who were making bombs at Columbia University. You had Black Power. You also had other ethnic groups in their political leanings towards the extreme. So it turns out there's a plot involving guns being sent to Puerto Rico to help with the independent liberation. So he gets involved in that, and he gets involved with Sweet William, who is the kind of Puerto Rican gangland boss, played by Henry Darrow. But again, it's the early 70s, so you've got this racial tension in the film. It's early 70s, so it's got a great score. It's early 70s, so it has bleak moments. You know, things aren't happy and shiny. It's a dark film in more ways than one. The streets are almost like wastelands. There's some really nice dialogue in it. It's a bit rough around the edges. It could have perhaps done with a little bit of trimming. But it's a really good 70s rogue cop film. And again, the 70s for me is America's last great decade of cinema. You know, the mainstream films were political, they were edgy, they were more realistic as far as the endings are concerned. Again, speaking about Parallax View, Robert Duvall gives another fantastic Robert Duvall performance as a man on a mission. There is the obligatory car chase, which again stems from Bullet in 1968 with Steve McQueen, and then obviously in the French Connection. So it was one of those things that, oh, you need a really impressive car chase, so there's one in the 7-Ups, and then in Badge 373 there's one involving a bus pre-speed, which is perhaps a bit ridiculous, but you have to. It's almost as if you had to have a car chase, or in this case a bus chase, in your early 70s rogue cop film. Again, it has some interesting points about America's foreign policy. Sweet William makes fantastic points about capitalism in America. So even though, you know, the Puerto Ricans are viewed as the villains, we do find out what their motivations are and why they're doing it. And it's just a really nice little 70s cop film, which again I'd never seen before. So thanks again to Indicator for putting out another really nice release. Again, as always, you have a nice little book with critical response, an on-set diary, and a nice little essay on the film. And like I said, there's a Welcome to Fear City 25-minute interview with one of the former detectives, Randy Jurgensen, because Eddie Egan died in 1990, I believe. And there's also a 29-minute talk by film critic Glenn Kenny called Lethal Enforcers about the styles and trends of the 70s cop movies, which is very good as well. There's original trailer, TV spot, radio spot, image gallery, 36-page booklet, and limited to 3,000 copies. That's badge 373. If you're a fan of Robert Duvall, it's a must pick up. If you're a fan of 70s cop films, it's a must pick up. And if you're a fan of Indicator, it's a must pick up, strangely enough. So thanks very much for watching this random review of another Indicator film, because they do come up with little gems. And hopefully we'll see you again for more random reviews. This is Solitude Ronan saying, have a pleasant day and farewell.